So last week, the White House quietly released a document that makes the Cold War look like a friendly neighborhood watch program.
It's called the National Security Strategy, and it explicitly says the U.S. plans to reassert control over our hemisphere, our energy, and even who we're allowed to trade with.
They call it the Trump Corollary. We call it a takeover.
But Mark Carney has a plan to stop them. Welcome to the silent war for Canadian sovereignty, everyone. And if you want to read the National Security Strategy, the NSS yourself, we have links to it in the description below.
So buckle up, because Canada is all over this thing, directly and indirectly, and the meaning is unmistakable. We're going to break it all down for you and tell you why this matters. So stay with us.
Before we jump in, quick note. We've opened a private Facebook group called Unfiltered North where you can talk freely with like-minded people. It's private, it's moderated, and it's safe. If you want a space to connect with like-minded people without the trolls, join us over at Facebook. We put the links below.
So let's be honest. Trump's idea of studying national security is checking Fox News from a golf cart. So there's no way that he wrote this. This thing was ghostwritten by the far-right ideologues, white nationalists, and Kremlin groupies who've traded the stars and stripes for something a lot darker.
Let's start with the one line that tells you everything about the new American worldview. The United States will reassert and enforce the Monroe Doctrine to restore American preeminence in the Western Hemisphere. That's all the way in page 15, by the way.
And the preeminence isn't a gentle word. It isn't partnership or collaboration. It means one country calls the shots and everyone else lives with the decisions. And yes, that includes control over military installations, ports, key infrastructure, and strategic assets. Tell me that doesn't sound like Red Dawn with a spray tan.
The document goes further by saying the U.S. will stop any non-hemispheric competitors from owning infrastructure, minerals, ports, energy assets, or anything Washington considers strategically important.
Which basically means we'll decide who you partner with. And the justification isn't subtle. The document explicitly calls for reshaping the hemisphere, forcing countries to align with U.S. interests, and pushing out any influence Washington doesn't control.
That directly affects Canada's Arctic partnerships, our trade diversification, our minerals sector, our telecommunications, our ports, and our energy projects.
Which is interesting because Canada just signed major deals with Japan, Europe, and the UAE, all involving critical minerals, energy, Arctic routes, and deep tech cooperation. So yes, they're talking about us without even saying our name.
It literally declares a Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. Trump is taking an old idea and twisting it into his own more extreme version, one where the U.S. doesn't just tell outside countries to stay out, but also feels entitled to control or dominate its neighbors, including Canada.
Remember, we've been warning about this for a year. Trump already laid out how he sees Canada in that Time magazine interview, saying Canada relies entirely on the U.S., we offer nothing they need, and that our prime minister is basically their governor. It sounded outrageous to many back then, even though we all knew that he was serious. But now, when you look at this new national security strategy, the mainstream media can't ignore it any longer.
The NSS treats Canada not as a partner, but as a territory inside America's sphere of influence. They don't call us a trusted ally or a NORAD partner anymore. They've dropped us into a strategic sphere of responsibility. In geopolitics, that's a polite way of saying colony. It's the same language the Kremlin uses for Belarus and Kazakhstan.
Our borders become suggestions, our laws become optional, and our independence becomes a clerical error they intend to correct. In their eyes, we're no longer a sovereign decision maker or an equal ally. We are dependent to be managed.
Remember when Trump kept saying that our border was an imaginary line? Well, this is clearly what he meant. He had no intention of giving up on taking control of Canada, and this doctrine was always the plan.
The document also says the U.S. will discourage collaboration with outside powers and insist that allies accept American terms for trade and investment.
And this is why Prime Minister Carney has been working so hard to distance himself from the USA and pivoting Canada towards the EU, South America, the Indo-Pacific, and the Gulf states.
Carney keeps saying the old relationship is over, And he backed that up with new trade deals, critical mineral agreements with Japan and the EU, Arctic shipping partnerships with Scandinavia, a 5% defense investment plan, and reshored supply chains. It's a counter-strategy built for exactly this moment.
And let's be blunt. The strategy repeatedly emphasizes controlling critical minerals, supply chains, and strategic assets. Canada is the jackpot in all three categories. Critical minerals? Check. Hydro for New York and New England? Oil infrastructure their refineries rely on? Check. Arctic access? Massive check.
If the US believes it must dominate the hemisphere to stay secure, then Canada becomes not just an ally, but a resource bank, which is exactly why we need diversification like yesterday.
Carney is building a firewall before this doctrine becomes a lived reality. Australia already did it, Japan did it, Europe is scrambling to do it, and now Canada is catching up. And thanks to Carney, Canada already is building exits before the door slams shut.
Now let's look at Europe, because they get roasted too. And Canada should pay close attention, because destabilizing Europe affects every trade pivot that we're trying to make to reduce our dependence on the US.
The document says Europe is on the brink of civilizational erasure and will be unrecognizable in 20 years or less. This is the exact language used by far-right parties across Europe and by Putin himself. The US is just now formally adopting it as policy.
If you're a European leader reading this, you're not reading an ally strategy. You're reading a declaration of political warfare. And if you're Canadian, you should feel a chill that has nothing to do with the weather.
The migration section is extremely blunt. It says the era of mass migration must end and argues that countries accepting large numbers of newcomers are becoming unstable. And they specifically tie that instability to whether countries remain reliable allies.
Which is an incredibly dangerous shift because it means the US now measures alliance strength by whether your demographics align with their racial preferences.
And they're not subtle about it at all. This is the Great Replacement Conspiracy Theory, the same poison that inspired events in Buffalo and in Christchurch. It was promoted from fringe rants to official U.S. doctrine. It reads like J.D. Vance's inner monologue got copied and pasted into the Pentagon policy.
It also gives them cover to treat allies differently, based not on policy or cooperation, but on who lives in your country. This matters to Canada because we have one of the highest immigration rates in the world, and the US knows it.
Then there's NATO. The document says that some NATO countries will become majority non-European, and therefore be less aligned with US interests and therefore maybe not trustworthy allies. In other words, we don't like what your population looks like anymore.
The document also criticizes European governments for supporting Ukraine, saying they're unstable, suppressing opposition, and trapped in unrealistic expectations.
It says that European countries are trapped in unstable minority governments, which is ridiculous coming from a president currently arresting protesters, sending National Guard into his own cities, and we all know Musk practically admitted that he rigged the election for Trump.
Now, whether you love or hate policies in Europe, this is a huge shift. The US is signaling it's pulling back from being the guarantor of European security.
Which leaves Canada in a dangerous spot. If Europe weakens, we lose leverage. If Europe fragments, we lose options. And if Europe turns inward, we lose partners.
And if you're wondering who loves this new strategy, well, it's Russia. They didn't even play coy about it either. And are we surprised? No.
A Kremlin spokesperson went on state TV and said the NSS corresponds in many ways with our vision. That's an extraordinary line. Moscow never praises U.S. strategy documents. Oh, unless they serve Russian interests, which is happening now.
Yes, and this one definitely does, almost point for point. A weakened Europe? Check. A fractured NATO? Check. A U.S. that steps back from defending Ukraine? Double check. That's a wish list straight out of the Kremlin's Christmas stocking.
And let's be honest. Moscow has been dreaming about this setup for a long time. Putin didn't just wake up yesterday and think, you know what, I'd love a U.S. president who echoes my worldview. He's been working on this since the 80s, looking for someone exactly like Trump. Surprise, surprise.
Yep, he has spent decades trying to weaken Western alliances And he won without lifting a finger, because now along comes a US president who attacks NATO, undermines Europe, bullies Canada, and treats strongmen like role models. You don't need a spy novel to see who that helps.
So when Trump brings back his Monroe Doctrine stuff, Putin hears it as an invitation, a big flashing neon sign. You take that half of the world, I'll take this half. Whether Trump understands the implications or not, the result is the same. Two men who love power and hate limits are carving out the world into two zones of dominance.
Call it whatever you want, coordination, alignment, or just reckless ego, but the outcome is indistinguishable from doing Putin's bidding.
And now that we know Russia approves of this doctrine, the stakes for Canada are no longer hypothetical. They're right in front of us, and they're quickly becoming a reality.
And let's be clear here, Canada is not just an afterthought. We're actually the prize. 4 million barrels of oil a day, a chunk of the world's critical minerals, massive Arctic access, renewable power needed by US states, and safe shipping routes.
In the NSS, our uranium, oil, timber, and critical minerals aren't treated as things to buy on the open market. They're framed as North American assets to be managed. They look at the Canadian shield and see a buffet that they never have to pay the bill for.
Why else do you think Trump has been so hard on Canada when it comes to trade talks? He's already said economic pressure is his path. And if he could threaten military action over Greenland, you better believe we're next on his wish list.
If the U.S. wants a hemisphere dominance, it runs straight through Canada and Mexico. We haven't forgotten that he's already threatened Panama with taking the Panama Canal. This man has been obvious from the beginning, and yet nobody paid attention.
But we did. You did. This entire community did. So why didn't mainstream media take him seriously earlier? Because this movement has been rising in the U.S. for decades. Militias, white supremacist groups, January 6th. This isn't new, it's an endgame.
And now they have their dear leader. But they didn't count on Canada. Democrats and average Americans have been baffled about how to stop Trump. But Canada, you threatened us even a little like you did last year with the 51st state, and we unite.
We elect competence over chaos. We don't let bots and rage addicts cloud our judgment. Canada is the most educated country in the world, and we showed how to shut down authoritarian ambition.
We're small, but we're mighty, and we're part of NATO. We have allies, and we're leading this global fight for democratic stability.
Which makes the timing of Carney's moves suddenly look very intentional. He's hedging, and he's doing it fast. Carney's been criticized for moving fast. Too many trade deals, too many defense commitments, too many partnerships all at once. But now you understand why.
Take the safe defense deal, the Gripen pivot, the new Borealis agency up north. That's Canada building a war-proof, Trump-proof, veto-proof future. We're not trapped in the room with them. They're increasingly trapped in a world where Canada has options.
We're not powerless. Far from it. We have leverage, but leverage only matters if you use it. And that requires unity, not self-sabotage.
This NSS is a warning. Not the end of the world, but if we ignore it, we'll end up negotiating from a place so weak even our moose might look embarrassed.
The United States wants to be preeminent in the Western Hemisphere and will prevent outside actors from owning strategic assets. But we know that more than 100 million Americans don't want Trump's America, and we have faith that they'll join us in this fight.
This moment is bigger than partisanship. It's bigger than left versus right. The U.S. has officially shifted to a worldview where democracy is optional, allies are expendable, trade is coercion, and they want to treat Canada like a junior property in an American portfolio.
And that means Canada needs three things immediately: unity, clarity, and strategy. Enough of the internal division, enough of the provincial theatrics. Polyev, Smith, Moe, and especially Jamil Javani, stop echoing MAGA messaging. You're weakening the country at the worst possible moment.
This document also gives us clarity, because now we know exactly what we're dealing with. We can diversify and create a strategy and show the Trump administration just what happens when you try to mess with Canada.
Strategy is already happening. We're opening our interprovincial borders, we're learning to compromise between industry and climate, and we're diversifying away from the USA. Canada is on the right track, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
And it's time we hold the media accountable. When we see our media giving voices to these right-wing MAGAs that are echoing Trump's talking points, we need to make sure to call them out. This is how Trump and his cronies took power in the USA, and we need to stop it in its tracks here in Canada.
So if you care about Canadian sovereignty, now's the moment to speak up. Share this video and hit like, because it pushes it out of our bubble.
And tell us in the comments, what should Canada do first? Should we diversify trade, ramp up defense, double down on Arctic control? Your answers help shape our future, and maybe we can figure this out together.
Canada's leading, and the world is watching.
And we're not going anywhere. So check out our next video here where we break down how Trump has always been the Putin patsy in the video below.
Thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you tomorrow.